Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on the return of the Apprenticeship Diversity and Social Mobility Forum. I'm privileged to be leading on such an important and critical subject matter for the Pathway Group and with such esteemed guest speakers and forum attendees. So thank you very much for attending. What we hope will be a really interactive session, so please get involved. Just really looking at the issue of social mobility, equality, diversity, inclusion, and equity of opportunity. It really should be at the forefront of everything we do, all of our thoughts, in terms of how we work on a day-to-day business, business, in terms of what we do within our business, in terms of everything we do, it should be at the forefront. It's pivotal to making a positive change in socioeconomic issues and embracing the society we live in, and ultimately to improve the lives of marginalised communities, and that's what we're here to do. We as the Apprenticeship Diversity and Social Mobility Forum, we're choosing to do this via apprenticeships, employability and employment. So the Apprenticeship Diversity and Social Mobility Forum, it's a thought leadership forum. So where we really want to share knowledge, insights for social and economic development. So again, really value your thoughts and obviously your attendance. So through the AD SMF and the Multicultural Apprenticeship Alliance, which is what I also lead on, we want to collectively raise the issue of social mobility, socioeconomic issues, equality, diversity, inclusion, and equity of opportunity, and make a positive change for underrepresented communities. So just in terms of what we're looking to do in the format, so as I said, please use this as an interactive session. We've got some fabulous guest speakers that I'll introduce in a second. So you have the chat function on your right, and there's an icon there. So please use this function for comments, insights, add any relevant links that you think might be useful. There's also a question and answer icon as well. So please ask questions via the Q&A function. And what we'll do is we'll ask any questions at the end of each presentation that I can field. Anything that we don't have time to answer, we'll put those questions through to the speakers, and then we'll send out the answers in the future. So in terms of once the recording's out with the presentations, we'll send those out. So again, please provide your valuable input, knowledge, and insights into the important subject of social mobility and the equity of opportunity. And just to say again, mention again, this will be recorded, and links to the recording presentations will be shared after the session. So without further ado, I will just introduce you to our first guest speakers. So our first guest speaker is Phil Kenmore. So Phil is the Director of Corporate Development at Partnerships at the Open University and leads on the portfolio within the commercial unit. He creates partnerships with solutions for businesses and public sector organisations, helping to solve skills, training, recruitment and retention issues with OU support. Before joining the OU, Phil had a career spanning being an executive director of an NHS hospital, a partner in a global management consultancy, and running his own business. In consulting, Phil worked in both UK-wide and global roles. Phil's passions are for education and healthcare with an expertise in the public sector. So welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Jack.
Jessica Lee Jones, MBE, is the CEO of Iongo Solutions, a multi-award-winning engineer, social entrepreneur, and professional speaker. The former UK Engineer of the Year kickstarted their engineering career with the development of a series of patented novel fabric optic sensing technologies for pregnancy monitoring. In a typically unorthodox manner, she trained as an installation electrician before receiving a BSc in astrophysics from Cardiff University. Jessica entered the manufacturing industry, initially managing technology developments associated with the Industry 4.0 movement and later managing large operational teams. She studied human resources management and became involved in organizational design and learning and development strategy. Wow. We have really got some esteemed guests here. So welcome. Thank you very much for attending the ADSMF, and I can hand across to you.
Thanks, Jagger. We really appreciate those lovely introductions. Thanks so much. Wasn't quite expecting the whole bio to be used. I'm slightly embarrassed. I'm sure Jessica is as well. It's a real pleasure to be here, everyone. We're really pleased to be with you this morning. Thank you very much for hosting us. And let me just share some slides with you. We're going to talk a bit about the social mobility report that we've done recently with the Open University and Training Zone, which Jessica very kindly authored for us. I just wanted to start with a very brief introduction to the Open University. I'm sure some of you, of course, will know the Open University, but I just want to say a little bit about ourselves and our position in terms of social mobility and why it's so important to us and why we do the work that we do around social mobility. There's just a little, you already had the bios from us, so that's that. So in terms of the Open University, you may or may not know this, we're the largest higher education institution in the UK. We've got just over 200,000 students. Of our students, 26% of our undergraduates actually live in the 25% most deprived areas of the UK. We're a four nations university. We have about 77% of our undergraduates came to us to study with no previous higher education qualifications. We have an open access policy, as I'm sure many of you will know, and we continue to be very proud of that. And that's part of our mission, our social mission, to give people access to education. A little known fact, we've actually got the largest element of students who declare a disability of any university in the UK, 37,000. That's more than some students for any whole university, but certainly at the OU, it's a very large degree of our students. And 7 out of 10 of our students are already in work, so they're studying while working. So we're helping people to move on and progress their careers and develop their skills. Just to say briefly a little bit about the Open University and social mobility directly. Our mission, our enduring mission for 53 years now, has been to be open to people, places, methods and ideas. It's why we exist as a university, and we see ourselves as much as a social movement as a higher education institution. Our vision is about making sure there's life-changing learning that enriches society, and that's what we aim to deliver, and that's what we work really hard to do as much as we can. We have a relatively new strategy. We've refreshed our strategy recently, as many universities have, of course, and we've got 5 key goals for our strategy. And one of our most important, is equity. And that's one of our key goals because that's core to everything that we do, trying to ensure the greater diversity at all levels of the university itself and inclusion in every aspect of how we work and what we achieve with our students and with society as a whole. Improving our reach across different communities and different types of students and communities to allow them to access higher education is another one of our key goals, and that's very, very important to us. So social mobility underpins a huge amount of the work that we do and is foremost in lots of our thinking in terms of how we plan to work with students. So we're here today to talk about the Enabling Social Mobility white paper, as I say, that Jessica very kindly agreed to author for us. I'm going to hand over to Jessica really to just talk us through the aspects of that paper that we want to highlight to you today. Jessica.
Thanks, Phil, and welcome everybody. Good to see so many of you here. I see lots of people putting in the chat where they're based today. I'm in sunny Blackpool, so I'm currently visiting Blackpool College for the Institute for Apprenticeships. So good to be able to join you from up north. It's much colder up here than where I'm from, I have to be honest, but I'm getting used to it. Anyway, I just wanted to start by really sort of, I suppose, following quite an overwhelming introduction. I just wanted to start by really explaining why this is an important subject to me and you know, alongside the OU, why we felt this was an important topic to write about for businesses. So a little bit on my personal background, I suppose. So I came through an inner city Cardiff school. We didn't have a sixth form. I'd never heard of an A-level. Freshers was a TV program at that point in time. So I suppose what I'm saying is I came from an area where there was third generation worklessness. There were no major companies other than the steelworks, which was behind the school and polluted into the school every day. There were no kind of institutions. So we literally had a primary school, a secondary school, and a doctor's surgery. So there wasn't really a huge amount to aspire to, I suppose. And with that, there weren't many opportunities. But there was a lot of talent. The trouble was that most of us, you know, we either wanted to be sort of footballers, drug dealers, or reality TV stars, because that's all we could really see around us. I wanted to be a software engineer. I was always a little bit different. I wanted to be a software engineer. I had it in my head that that's what I wanted to do. I started my career as an apprentice electrician, as Jagdeep kindly pointed out, before getting involved with something called the Engineering Education Scheme Wales. So for those of you obviously not in Wales, there's a similar scheme in England. And really what this did was create opportunities for young people, 16, 17-year-old young people, to work closely with industry. So creating that link between kind of employment and education. And it was designed really to give those young people an experience whilst also allowing those companies to invest in their local communities. So I got partnered with a local medical manufacturing firm in a different district of Cardiff, and developed a series of fibre optic sensors for detecting uterine contractions. So we were looking at preterm labour. And the solutions that I developed were very simple, but they managed to save the company around 99% of manufacturing costs. And that created opportunities to sell some of that technology into sort of emerging markets where, I'll give you an example. Ethiopia has or did have a horrendously high maternal and infant death rate. So we were able to take this technology and sell it into different markets to really kind of help people. And with that, I became the first female UK Young Engineer of the Year. 6 months later, I was invited to study astrophysics at Cardiff University, a bit of a twist from the electrical apprenticeship. And I was the first in my family. It was initially a huge step up for me. I wasn't ready for that kind of academic challenge, but I eventually went through it and graduated top of my class. So somebody invested in me, somebody gave me an opportunity, right? And I'm, as a result, a firm believer that talent is everywhere, but opportunity often isn't, or even if it is, at least it isn't visible to many of us. But I also believe that we can change that. And I do believe that we can unlock hidden talent. We as kind of business owners, L&D managers, can fuel organizational growth and innovation capacity, and help to contribute to creating more prosperous communities. So the OU and myself and Training Zone, as well as the other partner on this report, we were really kind of aligned on wanting to create a very practical guide, a very matter-of-fact, practical guide to enabling social mobility in the workplace, to empowering L&D managers to understand and to speak about social mobility, and to introduce different initiatives, tried and tested initiatives in many cases, but also new initiatives, to really boost the social diversity of their workforce and, as I say, contribute to creating more prosperous communities, but also actually to improving the performance of their business. Next slide, please. Thank you, Phil. So I'll just wait for that to come through. It's not moved my end. Ah, there we are. Perfect. Okay,
Apologies.
so as you can, that's okay.
I'm on it.
So there are a broad range of topics that are covered in the report, and many of these will be familiar to you. So I won't dwell on some of the more sort of academic stuff. But really what the white paper does is take us on a journey from recognising and defining social diversity and social mobility, what it means, how you can recognise it, how you can measure it, through to doing a deep dive into some of the, what I would call, hidden socially diverse talent pools. So we selected 3, partly because we had about a 4,000 word count and we could have written about this for weeks and weeks. So we selected 3 that we thought were quite interesting and maybe aren't often considered. But of course, notwithstanding that there are many, many more hidden talent pools. And often it is geographic, and it is, sort of specific characteristics within your community that you may be able to identify other talent pools. But in this report specifically, we focus on 3 groups. So refugees and asylum seekers. We look at people in secure environments, and we look at former elite sports professionals. So these are areas, I suppose, where as a business and also with the OU's experience, we have had experience in dealing with these specific groups and demographics of people. And so what we tried to unpick was the unique experiences and the unique contributions that these particular underrepresented groups could offer our organisations, beyond, sort of things that maybe other groups could offer, but also the specific barriers that they face in engaging fully within the workplace. And we felt that was really important because, as I said at the start, really, where I came from, there was lots of talent, but the biggest barrier for us was not being able to see those progression routes. So if you could give kids from my school visibility of what they could do and give them a step-by-step path to achieving that, then they could do that. So it was very important as part of this report that not only identifying groups that could add value, but actually, can we understand their challenges and their barriers? And what we try and do is create some practical sort of hints and tips and practical ideas to really reduce those barriers and empower those groups. So then what we do within the report is we consider the role of the L&D manager or the L&D practitioner in championing social mobility in the workplace. So we try and give them a business case for doing it. So we explain to them the different types of social mobility, you know, and the different kind of talent groups that are out there. And then we look at, okay, how do we build a business case? How do we empower L&D managers to sell this concept of social mobility within their own organizations? So we look at 5 ways that L&D managers can support. So these are leveraging and channeling existing skills and experience to try and boost innovation within the workplace, identifying, accommodating and responding to those specific barriers that we mentioned for socially diverse talent groups to try and create equity. I think for the last 10 years, we've talked about equality, and equality is obviously really important, making sure people have access to equal opportunities, but sometimes that doesn't go far enough. So when we're talking about underrepresented or disadvantaged, socially disadvantaged groups, sometimes we have to go more than just giving them the visibility. We have to go more than just saying there's an opportunity here. We have to help them overcome specific barriers to access that opportunity. So we look at equity. And then we look at how L&D managers can challenge recruiting managers, obviously in a constructive and a positive way. So challenging some of the essential and desirable criteria. So do you really need a degree for that job? Do you really need this particular qualification? And if you do, can we help that person to gain that qualification or gain that experience? So it's really about challenging assumptions and preconceptions within our sort of standard recruitment and our traditional recruitment processes, I would call them. Then we look at how L&D managers can forge links between workplace learning and formalised education programmes. So basically creating that progression. And I've got some quite sort of personal experiences of this. When I worked at Sony, I worked, obviously, you know, large company you've probably heard of. I worked at Sony for sort of 6 years, and I went in as an engineer, but I very quickly realised that my role was about building skills and talent around me. And so we introduced an apprenticeship programme. But it didn't go far enough. We simply couldn't recruit enough apprentices, enough graduates to fill some of the higher technical roles that we had. And so we had to look at these socially diverse groups. And actually what we found is that when we were engaging with certain people, and you know, this particular group may have been sort of 40s, 50s, sort of mid 40s to early 50s, if they had had a difficult experience in an educational environment, if they'd struggled in school first time round, the worst thing you could do is put them back in a classroom, right? So we had to find ways to really blend and find positive ways to interact classroom learning with work-based learning in order to help them overcome some of those, you know, in some cases it was trauma from sort of earlier experiences. So yeah, so I think L&D's role in forging those links between formalised educational learning and work-based learning is really important. And the OU is a really interesting organisation in that sense, because you access some of those formalised programmes in a very, very different way. So you don't necessarily have to turn up and sit in a classroom, and you don't necessarily have to go through some of those experiences to still get where you need to get to. And, you know, micro-credentials are a really good example of how we managed to start that upskilling journey for people who had a poor experience first time round, because they could do small chunks of learning and build it into something rather than committing to a 3, 4, 5 year apprenticeship, for example. And then finally, on the L&D point, we look at how we connect that workplace learning directly to job descriptions and competency frameworks. So how do we build in learning as a culture within the fabric of the organisation? How do we make sure that that's reflected in job descriptions and competency frameworks? And how do we link that to wage progression? And that is one of the, you know, the 5 types of social mobility is wage mobility. So how do we ensure that there are clear linkages, particularly in a cost of living crisis, particularly in the current economic situation? How do we visibly and fairly demonstrate that link between learning, upskilling, value contribution, and then wage progression? So finally, then in the report, we explore some of those enablers of social mobility in the workplace, and many of these you will be more than familiar with. So apprenticeships are a great example. Many organisations now started to consider skills boot camps as a means of recruiting from new talent pools. There are also a couple of others, and so personalised learning, which I suppose is fairly self-explanatory, but entrepreneurship, and I wanted to sort of pick up on this because maybe it's a little bit less obvious, and maybe you think it's my Welsh accent and I'm trying to say entrepreneurship, but I am definitely saying entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is really this concept of creating new products and services from within an existing organisation, or even kind of entering new markets and territories within an existing and established sort of business model. And there are lots of benefits to entrepreneurship and developing an entrepreneurial culture within the workplace. So, all of this is in the report, but for example, things like creating a healthy risk appetite, developing psychologically safe relationships, encouraging people to try new things without fear of getting it wrong, without fear of failing, developing a diverse and an open mindset. That's really important. So often when I work with companies, and you look at, we do a lot of work in the kind of tech space, and you look at a typical tech team, and it's often quite male dominated and quite white. When you look at the customer demographic that they serve, it's often much more diverse. So being able to attract socially diverse and generally diverse talent groups into an organization and getting them working on that new product development process actually benefits your customers and therefore benefits the performance of your business as well. So that part's really important. And then also just encouraging collaboration and co-creation within the workforce is obviously a really, really positive step for any business. So this is why entrepreneurship is a really great thing to do. But interestingly and perhaps unexpectedly, I mean, I've worked in this space for a while, but maybe never quite put the two things together. But what we found when we conducted our research is that there was a really, really interesting link between learning and development and growth mindset and entrepreneurship. And what we also found was that in the middle of all of that, these kind of unique experiences that socially diverse people can contribute can really kind of boost that innovation and that entrepreneurial process. So I suppose what I'm saying is that leveraging socially diverse talent systematically within an entrepreneurial culture can really give your organization a sustainable competitive edge with its customers. And there's a really, really lovely case study that's in the report. So it came from an organization called Breaking Barriers. We interviewed lots of organizations when we were gathering evidence. Breaking Barriers is an organization that engages specifically with asylum seekers and refugees to find them work in sort of key sectors such as healthcare and nursing. And they brought to our attention this case study of a refugee camp, so a Syrian tented refugee camp called Zatari. And this refugee camp is now the second largest financial hub in Jordan, which is absolutely astonishing. And it came from the fact that refugees and asylum seekers in this refugee camp collaborated, brought their kind of unique insights and their unique experiences and innovated to develop a number of different products, but specifically solar powered and recycled products. And so the internal economy within Zatari, just as this kind of refugee camp, is now worth $14 million. So, that is entrepreneurship on quite a significant scale. But hopefully that, you can see that link between leveraging really, really unique experiences within your business and that obviously contributing to that performance. Next slide, please. So just finally, before I sort of hand back to Phil, what I wanted to share with you was a framework that we created, and this is available and it's explained in much more detail in the report. But essentially, this framework is an adaptation of an extended balanced scorecard. So it looks at things like key success factors, things to measure, and the extension part is where we then consider the broader impact of how these organisational activities contribute to our local community. So that's the community impact piece, and it's not necessarily obvious from that drawing, but there is a flow to this framework. So I'll just walk you through it quite quickly. So we start at the bottom with business needs. So we look for specific skills gaps that exist within the organisation. We consider behavioural and cultural norms that maybe are not aligning with the strategic direction of the company. We look at the diversity of the workforce at different levels and try to understand if that is representative of our customer base and our broader stakeholders, which is, as I say, often an issue in many, particularly tech-focused organisations. We then kind of flow those business needs up into the recruitment section. So L&D practitioners working with HR to develop a value proposition for the organisation. So why would a socially diverse person, or why would any person, want to come and work for your organisation? So that really should have learning and progression at its heart. Challenging the way that the organisation recruits, as we've discussed, understanding how learning can be used as a sort of unique selling point for your organisation. What can you offer individuals in terms of learning and career progression, and so on, and even looking at sort of barriers within the recruitment process then. So those formal qualifications, maybe being able to provide language interpretation within interviews, those sort of practical things that you can do to improve that process. And specifically, we quote in the report the AAA framework. So the AAA framework is something that we pioneered. Well, actually, I pioneered that in Sony before going to Youngo, but it's something that we live by in Youngo Solutions now. And AAA basically says attitude first, aptitude second, and ambition third. So those are the three things that we look for when we hire. What that means is we don't look for formal qualifications and experience. And if there are kind of regulatory reasons why we need formal qualifications, we commit to upskilling our sort of workforce to go through those. But attitude and cultural fit is often the most important thing. And if you can get that baseline right, and the person has the aptitude, so i.e. with an investment, they could get to the level that you need them to get to, then that's obviously the second point. And the ambition point is quite interesting, because that's sort of looking at the longer term. And I think as sort of business leaders and L&D practitioners, we have to look at how a person would fit into our organisation in the long term. So are they innovative? Are they forward looking? Do they want to drive our organisation forward? Are they entrepreneurial? Great. But at the same time, is our organisation in a position to satisfy their progression ambitions and their sort of personal objectives as well? So that's what we consider in the recruitment piece. That nicely flows then into retention, where we look at how we kind of support employees to acquire basic skills and knowledge. We've got a really, really interesting micro-credential. I believe it's free, Phil, that's available through the Open University on digital skills. So if you wanted to have a look at that as an example, I'm sure you could do that as well. But this is really around how can we create communities of practice for key specialisms? How can we create a shared learning environment, a sense of belonging? How can we work with line managers to ensure that line management is effective in identifying and supporting those growth opportunities and stimulating and motivating employees? That moves nicely into progression. So again, this is perhaps more of a policy level, working with HR to inform key policy decisions on how an organisation selects people for upskilling, how it upskills them, how learning opportunities are offered, other forms of progression, sponsorship, sabbaticals. We recently we've got a fantastically talented creative individual working in our business, and we recently sponsored them to do a 13-week sabbatical with the BBC. And the skills that she has brought back into our organisation around complex production management and videography are not only directly applicable, but actually her performance as an individual, having had that experience, has just absolutely excelled. So thinking about progression opportunities in a slightly unorthodox way as well. And finally, that community impact. I mean, why do we exist as organisations? A really interesting case study around dark factories. So what is the point in having a factory that runs itself with the lights off, because there's no people in it, it's just robots doing it, right? What is the point in that if there aren't people benefiting from it at both ends, either from the products or from working on it, etc. So the community impact, I think, is a really, really important aspect of this framework. So how do our actions flow through to contributing to the social mobility of our local community? If you have a prison in your local community, how can you help people in secure environments? If you've got a refugee population in your community? How can you help them to increase their social mobility? So I think that's really important, that as businesses we capture that, and we are very deliberate in how we are contributing to our local communities. So I suppose that's a quick overview
Fantastic.
of the report. I think I'm over time, so I'm going to hand back to Phil.
That's brilliant, Jessica. Thank you. It's such a fantastic talk through the report, and obviously that is available, and the link is at the end of the presentation. We just wanted to mention very briefly to finish, and we are slightly over time, just 3 very brief case studies. These are all available on YouTube links, which we can post for you, which are also in the report. Just to highlight really some of the examples, and the first one is from Jessica's own organisation. This is Mason. Jessica, did you want to say something briefly about Mason?
Yeah, very briefly. So I met Mason. I mean, he was a 22-year-old, introverted, wouldn't look at you, wouldn't speak to you. He was a repair operator when I worked at Sony, and I took over the repair team. And there was just something a little bit different about him. I mean, he was quite lazy. It was very difficult to get him to kind of do his targets. But what we noticed was that he'd do nothing all week, and then at the end of the week, he'd kind of fix a huge problem and end up exceeding everybody's targets. And so we recognized there was something a little bit special about Mason. And when we sort of sat down with him and looked at his ambitions and what he was interested in, we found he was really, really interested in software. So we got in touch with the OU and put him on a degree apprenticeship. Now, unfortunately, during the pandemic, Mason wasn't able to stay with Sony. So when we moved over to Younger, we took Mason with us. And I suppose that's one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this case study, is that, there are lots of apprentices that have been made redundant or have not been able to continue in their posts. And it is possible to translate those apprenticeships over to your organisation. It's a really, really rewarding thing to do. Mason is now our chief software architect and manages a team of 7 software developers. And he's in year 3 of his apprenticeship.
That's a brilliant example. Thank you, Jessica. It's so great to hear about apprentices being able to be moved over as well, because lots of people have a misconception about the difficulties of doing that. Very, very briefly, I'll just mention 2 others. I say there are YouTube links available to watch videos of these case studies. I wanted to mention Fola. Fola's a Nigerian-born mum of 3. She had a passion, a desire to be a nurse, to follow in her mum's footsteps. We managed to get Fola onto a nursing associate degree apprenticeship with the Open University and Kent Community Health Foundation Trust, and Fola's qualified as a fully qualified nurse associate now, and being able to move on to full nurse training as well. So she's well on her way to achieving her ambition and following in the footsteps of her mum. Great example there of one of the healthcare apprenticeships that give people so much opportunity to qualify professionally and get into the community of healthcare. I also want to mention Fiaz, and Fiaz was a bar manager up in North Yorkshire, and he wanted to put something back into his community in a different way, and he decided to join North Yorkshire Police. And again, through the Open University and a partnership with North Yorkshire Police, we've been able to get him onto a degree police apprenticeship, and he's now come through that. And he's basically, his feedback on the case study is quite interesting. He talks about the partnership where the employer, North Yorkshire Police, deliver all the practical training of how to be a police officer, and in partnership with them, the Open University deliver the academic content through supported online learning. And that's worked really well for him and the cohort, a very diverse cohort of police officers that they've now got in North Yorkshire coming through that process. So, but all those 3 case studies are available on YouTube. We'll be very happy to post the links to give people access to that. We're going to finish there. We've run over slightly. Thank you, Jessica. That was excellent. And we're open for any questions. If there's any immediate questions, Jagdeep, over to you.
That was really fabulous presentation, Phil and Jessica. Really, really thought-provoking, and some excellent work that you're doing there. Really, really interesting. We will share the links on the presentations and the links to the videos at a later date. I can't really see any questions. I mean, there's been some great comments in terms of how useful it was and how brilliant it was. And I don't know, has anybody got any questions for Jessica and Phil? We can't let them off this lightly.
While we're waiting, Jagdeep, someone's just posted the links there, I think.
Yes, the links have been. What we'll do, we'll package everything and then send that across.
Fantastic.
Okay, we haven't got any questions, but what we will do is, if they want to field any questions through the tab, we'll sort of collate those and then send those across to you, Jessica and Phil, and you answer those at a date. But I really just want to thank you. As I say, it's very, very thought-provoking. A lot of great stuff that you're doing. Very, very informative. Hopefully we can continue this working together and have you at further forums and multicultural apprenticeship alliance meetings and things such as that on such a important subject.
Thank you, Jagdeep. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that's great. So what a fabulous start. So again, thank you to Jessica and Phil. What we have now, we have Edward Donker from the Social Mobility Commission. And he's going to present on Apprenticeships that Work for All and Apprenticeships and Social Mobility, Fulfilling Potential report. That's back in 2020. I'll just provide you with an intro to Edward. So Edward Donker is an experienced policy professional, having worked in advisory roles across central government and arm-length bodies. Edward is currently head of stakeholder outreach at the Social Mobility Commission, with responsibility for commissions, employer programs, working across multiple sectors to create more inclusive and diverse socio-economic workforces. So thank you for joining us, Edward.
Hi, Jagdeep. Thank you for inviting me on today. I'll just pop my slides on. So hopefully everyone should be able to see these. Yes, that's it. Brilliant. I'll kick off. So as Jagdeep mentioned, so I'm Edward, head of stakeholder outreach at the Social Mobility Commission. So I was just going to briefly give you an overview of the SMC, who we are and a bit about what we do, and then look into our programme of work, particularly focusing on apprenticeships. So the Social Mobility Commission, so we're an independent arm's-length body of government, and we are sponsored by the Government Department Cabinet Office. So we have a statutory remit to monitor and advocate for social mobility across the UK, and we provide advice to stakeholders. So includes ministers, policymakers, think tanks, employers and organisations. We run an extensive research programme which is dedicated to building an evidence base on what works in improving social mobility. And we also work directly with employers and organisations to create more diverse and inclusive socioeconomic workforces. Move on to the next slide. So what is social mobility? So social mobility is about ensuring that a person's occupation and income is not tied to where they started in life, and ensuring people of all backgrounds have equal opportunities. So it's about ensuring that your socioeconomic background doesn't determine your outcomes in life. So it's about fairness and ensuring that everybody has the chance to succeed, regardless of what their parents did or where in the country they grew up or any other social characteristic. So broadly speaking, there are two types of social mobility. So there's relative social mobility. That's about ensuring that people have the opportunity through hard work and talent to improve on their own personal situation compared to that of their parents. And absolute social mobility. So that's about ensuring that overall each generation has better living standards than the next. Move on to the next slide. So if we just have a look at how apprenticeships fit into social mobility. So just to start off by mentioning, so our research does show that the majority of apprentices aren't from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So perhaps this is an obvious statement to some, but not as obvious to others. But policymakers and employers alike often talk and think of apprenticeships as being by default a social mobility tool, helping the disadvantaged, but it's not necessarily the case. So having said that, if apprenticeship programs are targeted, apprenticeships are one of the most effective tools of social mobility, an effective mechanism available to employers to build diverse, talented workforces. So I'm sure everyone on this call, you're all aware that there's now a mountain of evidence that confirm the benefits of that they confer on workplace learners. So enhanced career earnings, continued education, richer, more fulfilling working lives. They also play a part in closing the class pay gap while providing people the chance to earn while they learn. So something that's a crucial aspect for those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So apprenticeships, they also offer a non-degree route to higher skills, and if targeted, can provide a pathway for social mobility that is an alternative to a degree that's usually associated with strong social mobility outcomes. So what's the current landscape in apprenticeships? So as part of our research program in 2020, we published a report on apprenticeships and social mobility. So the report found that disadvantage gaps from those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds exist at every stage of the apprenticeship journey. So from employer selection, the value and quality of training, the probability of apprenticeships progressing and career earnings. It also found the apprenticeship levy has funded more higher level apprenticeships that tend to be more likely taken from learners from more privileged backgrounds. However, the report did show that apprenticeships can be a powerful tool for social mobility if they are targeted correctly. So the report found an earnings boost when a learner from a low socioeconomic background overcomes the barriers. They do get an earnings boost from completing an apprenticeship. So just moving on to the next slide. So in response to the report that we republished in 2020, when we were going out there talking to employers, they were asking us, okay, what can be done? So what can they do to support social mobility to ensure that their apprenticeships programs are doing their best to support social mobility? So last year, as part of our employers program, we published a toolkit aimed at giving practical tips and actions to employers and training providers on what they can do to ensure that their apprenticeship programs are supporting social mobility. So the toolkit was designed as a roadmap for anyone working in apprenticeships, committed to improving socioeconomic diversity within their programs. So it included recommendations on data collection, hiring of apprentices, outreach and progression. So it also included real life case studies and best practice guidance on how to ensure the quality of the access and quality of your apprenticeship programs to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So what I want to do today is just delve into some of the actions the toolkit identified. So as you can see here on the screen, there's just picked out a few of the key actions in groups. So just to start, so just taking, we can just take a look at a few of the key actions. So just pulling out data, as that's quite a big one, so we'll start off with that. So data is quite key. So when considering socioeconomic diversity, it is imperative that employers develop better data sets on socioeconomic background, ones that are equivalent to what is currently available for other diversity characteristics. So for employers and training providers, so measuring the socioeconomic background of your apprentices and potential recruits is it's the critical first step in the process. So it helps organisations know what needs to be done in order to improve the socioeconomic diversity of their programs. But we know it's not a straightforward process. So socioeconomic diversity data, it's not as embedded into organizational thinking as other diversity characteristics. So as part of that, we did a research program with employers to find out what would be most useful. So our research found that the key question we recommend that employers should be asking to ascertain socioeconomic background of an employee is what was the occupation of your main household earner when you were aged 14. So that's the key question to ask to assess someone's socioeconomic background. So we recommend using this question as it's the best and most accurate way to measure socioeconomic background. It's also the easiest to understand from an employee perspective, and it also gets the highest response rates in testing. So that's the key question to ask to ascertain the data. Let's move on to some of the other actions from our toolkit. So just looking at outreach. So outreach is a really critical step if you do want to build diversity into your programs. So employers should look at, we advise employers to look at outreach programs to recruit apprentices who are not currently in your network. So rather than expecting apprentices to come to you, so do some research and partner with some outreach organizations. So when thinking about outreach, we suggest that organizations develop a clear picture of who you want to reach and how it relates to your organizational goals. So thinking about backgrounds, experiences, geography and location. So another top tip we advise is provide outreach programs in schools and further education colleges to encourage individuals to consider apprentices. The main action there is to think about outreach programs and how you're actively trying to target individuals who might not be aware of your apprenticeship program or apprenticeships in general. So next, moving on to the section on culture. Culture is quite important within an organisation. Organisations should be thinking about how they can support their apprentices through your apprenticeship programs. So as part of that, we suggested that organisations could think about providing a range of contact points for apprentices, so across different levels of your organisation. So for example, through staff networks, mentoring programs, buddy schemes. So there might be questions the apprentice would rather ask a peer than a senior manager. So it's a way to structure that within your organisation. Another example we suggest is educate and train managers to offer pastoral support to apprentices, particularly where people might have complex and unique needs. Obviously, apprentices can be from quite a young age. They might not be used to the world of work, so it's just about ensuring that there is that support available. Another key point around culture within an organisation is around supporting and resourcing an apprentice network, and you could also link it to other staff networks within your organisations. So for smaller organisations, employers could signpost to existing apprenticeship networks outside of their organisation. Another key action from our toolkit is just around progression, and then just looking at progression within your apprenticeship programs. So one thing we advocate for is developing progression pathways for apprentices. So whether that's to a higher level apprenticeship or another job in your organisation or wider industry. So we suggest being active in enabling apprentices to achieve their career goals and apply some of the skills that they've learned in your programs. So you could do this, for example, by designing progression pathways for apprenticeships. So building the pipeline up from for apprenticeships up from level 2, and then really being clear about the steps to reach the next level. So one way you could do this is just talking with your apprentices about their next steps. So something I should have mentioned that when we were researching this toolkit, we did sessions with employers, providers, and apprentices themselves. And one of the things that that emerged was often some of the conversations that happened with apprentices and their managers tended to not occur till right at the end of the apprenticeship program. So something that we suggest employers could do is not leaving the kind of career conversations or progression conversations to the end. So don't start last minute, start those conversations early, have them regularly with the apprentices to figure out what their next steps are, and really kind of understand the progression that they could take. So whether that's to another apprenticeship within your organisation, or within another organisation, or within the wider sector. So just to cover off another key point here, just a point around the levy, looking at the wider ecosystem. So this is particularly relevant for larger employers. So thinking about your levy money and what you do with any, if you do have any unspent money. So there are schemes out there that do actually work to transfer unspent levy money. So for example, the Co-op has a levy sharing scheme where large organisations share their unspent levy funds with SME employers within their local area. So if you are a larger employer and you do have some unspent funds, thinking about reaching out to these different schemes that are available. So yeah, that was some of the top actions from our toolkit. So the toolkit is available on our website to download, and you can, it's quite a long document, but you can pick out if I want information on outreach or further information on hiring or recruitment data, please do check that out on our website, and I can put the link in the chat below. So just to mention some of the other work that we do at the Commission. So we have, as I mentioned, we have our employers program. So that was some of the actions from the apprenticeship toolkit that was part of the employers program. And the employers strand of our Commission, we build on extensive body of research and recommendations aimed at giving employers and organisations the practical tips to diversify their workforces. So we do have an event coming up later this month, so the 29th of November, just on T-levels. So what they are, why they're good for social mobility, and how they can support employers to access talented people. So yeah, the link's on there, and I can pop it in the screen. So yeah, and here's another range of our resources. So please do check out our resources on our page on our website. So I think that's the end of the presentation. So I can hand back to Jagdeep and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Edward. Another fabulous presentation, and again, some great work that Social Mobility Commission are doing around obviously social mobility. We've just had one question from Jill, who's asking, is there any support for enabling social mobility specifically aimed at SMEs?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again? Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry, yeah. Is there any support for enabling social mobility specifically aimed at SMEs, the SME market?
So when thinking about apprenticeships, so what we did within the toolkit itself, we tried to pull out specific actions that SMEs could take. So stuff along the lines of like apprenticeship networks. One of the things that came out during our research for it was, look, an SME employer can't fund an apprenticeship network within their organisation just because there won't be the numbers apprentices available. So one of the things that you could do was join up with, link in with other apprenticeship networks that are available. So other networks in your local area or other national networks. So yeah, the toolkit itself did try to pull out specific actions for SMEs. And then one of the things to mention, obviously, it talks about the levy sharing scheme. That's obviously for large employers, but they do try to give their funds to SMEs in their local area. So one of the things that, depending on what local area you're in, you could look at if there are any similar schemes in your area to understand, are any local larger local employers in your area joined up to any of the levy sharing schemes, and see if you could take advantage of that. But yeah, if you do go on the toolkit, there's action specific to SMEs.
That's great, thank you. And apologies, Jill, I think your question came in just after Jessica and Phil had left, but we will obviously field this question out to them. But thank you for asking that, Edward. And thank you also for referencing the Co-op levy sharing scheme. We've got Louise Timpley from the Co-op who's attending this, and she's also put a link into the chat in terms of Co-op's levy sharing scheme. Does anybody else have any further questions for Edward? I can't see any further questions.
I did get off lightly, so.
I think everybody has really so far in terms of presenting, but we have got Kasim after you, so maybe he'll get the brunt of the questions as well. So, and there's also I think Mark's asked around, is there a national and regional list of degree apprenticeships? And Solida has put something in, he's put a link in, but into the chat. But I don't know whether you know of any sort of list in terms of degree apprenticeships.
So I think obviously DFE, Department for Education Control, apprenticeship landscape. I think that possibly they will have a website that does outline. I can quickly check, but I think they do. So I'll have a quick look now, and I can post it in the chat if I can find it.
That's great, Edward. And just one question for me. So how can organisations actually sort of work with the Social Mobility Commission, get involved in the work that you do? I know I attended a webinar called The Year Ahead, where there was also a consultation document, and then also the pillars that you're concentrating on now. Is there a way that the organisations and attendees from today can actually work with Social Mobility Commission or the work that you do?
Yeah, definitely. So we have, as I mentioned, the the employers program. So essentially, it's a program designed to diversify socioeconomically workforces. So we work with cross-sector employers, looking at toolkits, guidance, and our monthly workshop for employers. So something, if any employers on the call were interested to be involved in that, I could pop the link, the contact details, and then they could get involved. So one of the things we particularly find is other employers like to understand what other employers are doing for case studies and best practice. So part of our monthly workshop is showcasing that best practice from employers. So we have a monthly workshop focusing on the different area. So whether or not it's recruitment or data or progression, and then we invite specific employers to kind of outline what they've been doing in whatever area we're looking in that month. So what I can do is I can put my details on there. You can get in touch with me whether or not you want to attend that session, or if it was something you are interested in sharing what your organisation is doing, we can have further conversations about that as well.
That's great, Edward. Thank you. And the questions are coming in now thick and fast. Sorry, Edward, we just have to hang on a little longer. So a question from Gavin Hoole, and this is a subject that I'm really sort of thinking about now, is around neurodiversity and how we sort of incorporate that within the work that I'm leading on. So, but Gavin's question is, what do you think of social mobility for neurodiversity groups? So
in particular reference to social mobility, we do look at intersectional elements. So for instance, our report, which is due to come out in, it won't be till next year, is looking at intersectional elements. But on the whole, because we don't own the policy for neurodiversity, that sits with another department, we focus mainly on social mobility and socioeconomic background. So that's the because it's not a protected characteristic, that's our kind of area that we focus in on. So there's the other government departments would look at neurodiversity. So it'd be the disability unit within the wider equality hub within the Cabinet Office, but they definitely they would focus on that, and they've got employers programs. So I can pop the link into the chat if it was something particular that any particular questions on that.
That's great, thank you, Edward. And Serena's just asked, how do we connect with Edward? So we'll obviously share your contact details. Yeah,
what I can do is once I finish the Q&A, I can put the details in the chat function, and then if anyone wants to get in touch, feel free to pop me a message.
That's great. And just sort of one sort of final question for me really is, obviously your report was from 2020, and obviously during the pandemic. How do we feel that, is there something that you're going to be looking to do in the future in terms of post-pandemic and how that's impacting on social mobility? And are there any sort of insights and findings that you're thinking about or are able to share?
Yeah, so really good question. And obviously the report was, the last report we published was in 2020. So we do actually want to refresh the report, looking at new data and looking at different angles. So we've actually got a project on at the moment, which is kind of an evidence review. So we want to look at certain things specific to apprenticeships. So looking at the pay, looking at the levy, looking at the routes, the information that young people are getting on apprenticeships. So it's a program of work we're actually taking forward at the moment. So it's something that over the next few months we're kind of gathering the evidence base for that, and we're actually looking to refresh the 2020 guidance. But yeah, that'll be something we're doing actively at the moment. It'll be, if all goes well, hopefully published by 2023, but at some point through 2023, yes. That's great. Thank you, Edward. I seem to have had a bit of a malfunction with my IT, so I can't really look at the chat, but I know there's sort of 10 pieces of chat. But what I will do once I get back online, are you staying with us, Edward? Yeah, I'll be online, so I can respond to any questions in the slide pack as well. That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Edward. Again, very insightful and a fabulous piece of work that you did. Great. So next is I'll hand you across to Kasim Chowdhury, who's from the Pathway Group, and he's going to specifically talk about the survey results from the Festival of Apprenticeships, and also the work that we're doing in terms of multiple apprenticeship awards as well. So Kasim Chowdhury is the Multicultural Apprenticeship Ambassador for Pathway Group, and he's also the non-exec director for Multicultural Apprenticeship Alliance and ThinkFest. Kasim has been working with Pathway Group for 7 years, heading all of the outreach, diversity and inclusion campaigns, and he really is an amazing individual that the majority of you will know, and he does a tremendous job in all our events, and really impactful events. So again, thank you very much, Kasim, for joining us today, and I'll hand across to you.
Thank you so much, Jack. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I just want to touch on the points Jessica made, and the 2 points that I want to just sort of touch on is the equity point and the entrepreneurship point. And these are 2 really important points, I think, from today's call, and 2 takeaways that I sort of want to focus on for everyone to remember when they leave today's session. Equity is all about, we don't all have the same 24 hours. Now, some of you may remember news reports that came out about some star saying that we all have the same 24 hours, so we should all be able to do the same. But actually, we don't all have the same 24 hours. We don't have the same resources. We don't have the same family environments. And actually, we need to understand what equity means. So I was really happy to see Jessica pointing out the importance of equity. Now, for me, equity is about understanding the challenges that each individual has, and how can we make sure that we make it a level playing field, so we're all starting the race at the same level as opposed to at the same starting point. And I think, you know, when you look at a race course, and you can see that actually where people who are closer to the inside of the course, they start further away, and those on the outside perimeter of the race course, they start closer. So it's, again, and it's the same thing we need to be looking at. We need to make sure people are starting at the same level, and we're looking at what individuals with different challenges and how you can support the different challenges that people face. And the thing that I like to talk about is, you talk about a young individual who is one of 5 children. They live in a council house which is only 3-bedroom, and then you've got another child who lives in a 3-bedroom house, has educated parents, has his own bedroom, his own workspace. And just comparing the two, and actually understanding how someone with educated parents has their own bedroom, has resources. You know, we learned during the pandemic that children were sharing laptops to do online working, whereas some from less disadvantaged backgrounds would actually have their own laptop. They had their own resources to learning, and they had the support from their parents who had been through the school system and were able to support them. So when we're talking about social mobility, I think equity is probably the most important thing we need to be thinking about. How can we as organizations be more equitable, and how can we identify individuals and support them through the process, especially with apprenticeships? So whether that's on the job or off the job training, looking at what additional support we can put in. And I know there's been conversation about neurodiversity. Are you assessing the neurodiverse needs of your apprentices, so you're able to support them with that extra support? And you know, we've been having conversations about this. There is funding available for apprentices who have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. So it's really important that you are assessing your learners for neurodiverse needs, because there is extra support out there for them. Now, I understand I am the individual between you and your lunch today, so I'm going to keep it really short and snappy. And I'm going to head over to our 100 apprentice report. When my slides load. But first of all, I'd just like to congratulate and thank everyone that supported us with our Multicultural Apprenticeship Awards that took place not last week, but the week before. I can't believe it's been that long already. But, you know, a fantastic evening celebrating diversity in apprenticeships, all of the fantastic employers that are supporting their apprentices, the learning providers, and also those organizations behind the scenes like Amazing Apprenticeships, and, you know, our endpoint assessment organizations, our training provider networks across the country, people like the Ladder of Birmingham, you know, supporting the sector, but behind the scenes. So not always at the forefront of these celebrations. So I just want to give a special thanks to all of those organizations for their support. People like AELP, there's a number of them, and if I forget you, I'm really sorry, but you're all doing fantastic work. As you know, it was a jam-packed evening, lots to celebrate, and I'd encourage you all to get involved again next year. The nominations will be open from National Apprenticeship Week in February, and if you are interested in getting involved in the awards more, please do reach out and feel free to get in contact. Now, what the awards allows us to do is reach out to apprentices and find out certain information that we wouldn't normally be able to find out. And as you can see in front of you, here's a couple of questions that we went out and asked the apprentices, and these are the responses we got back. Now, instead of talking about the doom and gloom. What I'd like to do is try and support everyone on this call in how we can improve these figures. And hopefully next year, when people say, do you feel disadvantaged because of your race, instead of 39% saying no, we want that to be 100%. Now, I know it's going to take some time, but how can we make people feel more welcome from different races? And, you know, it's that age-old question of the imposter syndrome. So people from multicultural backgrounds do feel imposter syndrome. And for me, you know, I'm from a multicultural background. I always feel imposter syndrome when going for, when I used to go for job interviews and things like that. And even when I go into meetings, I do feel it. And it's about how do we make it a level playing field? How do we get rid of that imposter syndrome? How do we make people on the other side of the desk feel comfortable when they're coming in for interviews, when you're having meetings with your diverse staff? How can you make them feel more comfortable? And I think that's to do with your culture and your organization, and what are you doing to celebrate these individuals? And then again, you know, a bit more positive on whether employees feel that your organization is inclusive and equal. And we've got 60% yes, only 20% saying no, but still 20% unsure. So again, it comes back to what are you doing to celebrate people from diverse backgrounds? What are you doing? You know, and it comes back to equity. You know, what are you doing to make it a level playing field for them? And I would look at examples of what other organizations who are doing it great are doing. You know, are you celebrating cultural events? Are you following cultural sensitivity? One of the questions that will come up later on is when you talk about events. So are your events inclusive of all your staff? Are they representative of all your staff members and the minorities within your organization? So, you know, I sit on a board for young professionals and we were talking about event ideas. You know, is it right that all of the events are drink led? You know, there's a lot of members who probably don't drink. So what are you doing to provide them with something to attend where they don't feel excluded because they don't want to go to something that's drinks led? So again, there's lots of different things you can think about here. And it could be to do with your team meetings, your Christmas parties, your socials, your team building events. Have a think about how you're being inclusive to those minorities in your organization. Another one is, do you feel that your employer does enough to support you? Now, we all know that people will stay with an organization if they feel welcome and if they feel supported. So again, as Jessica mentioned, who are you offering those progression opportunities to? How are people getting the opportunity to progress? What management support, what mentoring support is there for those individuals in your organization to succeed? So again, very high level here. Just want to touch on some of the really important points that, you know, have been raised, but have a long, hard think about what you can do to support employers through, you know, within your organization. We all know that happy employers are productive employees. So try and work out, do surveys, ask your employees what would they like to see you do. Ask your apprentices, you know, are they happy? You know, what can you do to support them further? What mentoring? And, you know, I would encourage all organizations to have reverse mentoring. So the managers are being reverse mentored by apprentices so they can get a real feel for how those below them are doing. Again, this is an interesting one, bearing in mind that the proportion of people, apprentices, that were asked the questions came from corporate organizations. And a lot of them still don't feel that organizations do enough to recruit from diverse backgrounds. Now, I know this is very difficult for any organization to specifically go out and recruit from diverse backgrounds, but there are things you can be doing. And I believe, you know, if you're engaged with your local community, you're engaged with community and faith groups, you can really fill this void. And I think it's about branding as well. Are you putting your employer brand out there? Is it welcoming to people from diverse backgrounds? You know, who are the faces of your organization? This is very important, because I remember speaking to a young lady who was one of our judges for the awards many years ago, and she said, I only became an accountant because I went to a careers fair where I met a black man who was an accountant, and I genuinely didn't think black people could be accountants. Now, these were her exact words. Now, to think that this is what people from multicultural backgrounds think, it sort of makes us wake up to see what can we be doing to make them feel more inclusive. So existing representation in your organization and promoting that existing representation in your organization is vital to encouraging more people from diverse backgrounds to join your organization. And again, don't be shy to shout about all the great things you're doing. I think a lot of organizations feel like they don't want to talk about the good things they're doing. They don't want to show off. But I think it's really important that you do this. If you are putting people forward for the Multicultural Apprenticeship Awards, make sure you're shouting about it. Make sure you're shouting about it internally. Make sure you're shouting about it externally. Make it part of your brand to talk about all of the diversity things you're doing within your organization, and shout about it, because as Serena's put, branding is very important to attract people to your organization. It's very interesting, when we ran the Festival of Apprenticeships, a lot of young people couldn't associate apprenticeships with certain brands, and actually by seeing the brands at the event, it allowed them to understand what the organizations do. So again, really important that you get your branding on point. So this is a very interesting one. Where did you find out about your apprenticeship? The sad state of affairs is that not many people find out about apprenticeships through schools, and a lot of them is through their own homework. And we need to be doing more to champion schools and support schools with sharing the positive message of apprenticeships, because we know that they deliver when it comes to social mobility. We've heard the stories, we've seen the success stories, and that they were shared earlier on in this presentation. So we really, as a collective and as a forum, we need to bang the drum and really encourage schools to do more, because 7.8% of people only finding out about apprenticeships from schools is just not enough. Because if you think about the amount of time that young people spend at school, this is where they're educated, this is where they're told everything about their future and their career, and they're not hearing about apprenticeships. It's not good enough, and we really need to do more. And then, how do you think apprenticeships are viewed in your community? Again, only 30%, just less than 30%, saying positively. Still a large proportion saying negatively. Again, what can we be doing? The evidence is in front of us. Apprenticeships are still seen negatively. What, as organizations and employers, learning providers, can we be doing to promote apprenticeships? We need to be promoting our role models in our organization. We need to be shouting about it again on social media, in press releases. Anything you can do to promote apprenticeships is going to add value to the sector as a whole. And ultimately, it would support you in getting the best talent on those apprenticeship programs, because we do lose a lot of talented apprentices who may have taken up an apprenticeship but just don't know about them to go into university and to go on to do other things. So when I say to organizations, why is it important to promote apprenticeships as a whole, the reason for that is we are missing out on talent. By not having people see apprenticeships as an opportunity, you are missing out on fantastic talent that could be joining your organization, having left school or college, and be a fantastic part of your organization and helping you to grow. So it is everyone's responsibility to promote apprenticeships. Again, I think we've already covered this. Do you feel work events / socials are inclusive and appropriate for all? 50% said yes, 40% said no, 10% unsure. Again, we've covered this already. We just need to do more to be inclusive, be mindful of people from different backgrounds, be mindful of all the different cultural events that are taking place throughout the year, and how can you incorporate them in your social event calendar. There's lots you can be doing, and if you want any advice on this, please do feel free to reach out. How likely are you to recommend an apprenticeship to others? Again, very positive. 90% of the individuals that we spoke to said they would recommend apprenticeship to others. So, utilize your apprentices. The best people to sell apprenticeships are apprentices themselves. So make sure you're getting your young people out there and get them to talk about your organization and apprenticeships as a whole. And again, Gavin has put a great point in about those with 27% that are neurodiverse population, and only 3% are in employment. So what can we do to support that? Again, just because someone has dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism does not make them unemployable. We need to be looking at how can we integrate these individuals into our organizations. And it could be just small little adjustments. And again, when we're looking at apprenticeships, there is funding available to support apprentices with neurodiverse issues. So again, please have a look at the different things. And if you need any further support with any of these issues, do reach out to us, reach out to myself, reach out to Jag. And there's some fantastic people who are part of this forum that can help you. So I'm just going to move on to something that we launched last year. So this year, we held our first event, but we launched it last October, and it's the Festival of Apprenticeships. Now, the reason I launched the Festival of Apprenticeships was because we didn't feel enough was being done to celebrate apprenticeships and actually to get people in the room talking about apprenticeships. So we launched the festival last year. We had our online event during National Apprenticeship Week, which was a series of online events. We also ran a careers roadshow in the summer. But what we really found out was that parents, who are one of the main decision makers, aren't getting enough information. So this year, we're really proud to announce that we'll also be doing a careers parents evening in October and November next year. I won't bore you with too many of the details. All this information is available on our website. And I do welcome you to connect with me and arrange a call so I can discuss it in further detail. But just here's some stats in terms of who attended last year and our engagement. One of the things, some of the feedback that we got from both employers and those who attended was it's not about quantity, it was the quality. So a lot of the young people that attended were genuinely interested in apprenticeships and wanted to find out more. I think the biggest success story for us was I shared the event in a business networking group, and one of the people in the networking group shared the event with his son. His son came to the event and was so impressed with what he saw. He went to, I think the training provider was Active Learning, and he was on program within a week. So he was studying at college, wasn't enjoying himself at college, came to the Festival of Apprenticeships and was on program within a week. So a huge success story for us. And that's what we mean when we say apprenticeships really do deliver. And it's so important that you're not missing out on talent. So it's important that you're at events like this so you can showcase your organization and really reach out to people. I know Serena's asking, where are the events based? So the National Apprenticeship Week event is online, so it's national. We reach out to thousands of young people across the country. And then we have our Summer Apprenticeship Careers Roadshow. So we are looking at doing Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, and London. And we'll be looking at doing similar locations for the Parents' Evening in autumn as well. And again, all this information is available. Here are some of the fantastic organizations that have been a part of it previously. And yeah, we look forward to you welcoming us. There's my details there to get in contact. And I'll also put it in the chat. And I think that's everything from me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kasim. I know we've actually looked at the stats from the Festival of Apprenticeships, and we're also looking at sort of Gavin's stat that he's put across as well around those with neurodiversity issues. We've started, but there's a long way to go. And I think in terms of doing this, it is all around sort of collaboration and working together. So there's just a couple of comments. Obviously, you've referenced what Serena said around branding. Mina's also mentioned around sort of equality, around offering a range of soft drinks and more than juice and water to individuals. A lot of people just commenting how insightful, how interesting it is. Serena's also asked a question around where the Festival of Apprenticeships will be based and how does the business sponsor the event. That'll be music to your ears, Kasim, I'm sure.
All the support.
All the support, yeah. Yeah, and those are sort of the questions, and we'll. So Serena, Kasim's provided a link, so if you can take that offline and speak to Kasim directly, and if there's anybody else who wants to speak to Kasim, that's great as well. So, so thank you, Kasim. Thank you very much for that. Really insightful and really useful. And we will be again sharing the slides later.
Does anyone have any questions? Is there any questions?
We haven't got any questions yet specifically for that. It was just around, as I say, Serena asked a couple of questions around how to sponsor the event and where will the Festival of Apprenticeships be based. Great, thank you, Kasim. Okay, that just leads me to thank you all for attending. Hope you found it useful, insightful, and meaningful. The hour and a half or the 90 minutes has just really flown by. We're looking to hold these on a quarterly basis, so please send out the likes and whatever else on LinkedIn and whatever sort of social media you're on, but also please sort of commit and invest some time to attend these in the future. Really interested in working in collaboration. There's a lot of individuals and organizations who have attended or weren't able to attend that I'd really like to be part of both the Apprenticeship Diversity Social Mobility Forum, but also the Multicultural Apprenticeship Alliance, again, which again is trying to get a lot of organizations, a lot of thought leaders around the table to really develop this into a campaign, into a movement, in terms of how we can really make that difference and lobby for change. So finally, just to thank the presenters as well. So thank you to Phil, Jessica, Edward and Kasim for joining us. For me, it's been great. As I say, it's been my first one, so thank you very much for being kind and gentle with me. And I really hope to see you at the next one. Probably looking around February for the next one. As I say, they're held every quarter. And then we'll also send the presentations and any questions that you may have. We'll field those to the presenters and send the answers through as well. That's great. Thank you very much.